mist clung to the ancient trees like a shroud, muffling all sound and reducing visibility to mere feet. I adjusted my camera strap, squinting into the gloom. The forest felt wrong, unnaturally still. I used to be a park ranger here in Olympic National Park, before the incident. Now I'm just a nature photographer, more comfortable with the company of trees than people. I'd been tracking a particularly elusive elk through these woods for days. The shots would be worth a fortune if I could get them, assuming I could find my way out of this god-forsaken fog. That's when I saw it. A dark shape looming out of the mist. As I drew closer, I realized it was an old cabin, weathered and sagging. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. Curiosity got the better of me. I approached cautiously, my instincts from my ranger days screaming that something was off. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, creaking ominously in the slight breeze. The stench hit me first, the sickly sweet odor of decay, mixed with something else, something animal. I gagged, covering my nose with my sleeve as I peered inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in deep gouges, like something with massive claws had been trying to claw its way out, and there were messages frantically scratched into the wood. It's inside Maine. Full moon tomorrow. I can't stop it. But it was the last message, barely legible, carved into the floorboards with what looked like fingernails torn down to bloody nubs that sent ice through my veins. If you are reading this, run. I am still here. A low growl from behind me made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I whirled around, coming face to face with a nightmare. It was vaguely wolf-like, but much, much larger. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence, and its muzzle was stained dark with what I prayed wasn't blood. But the most horrifying thing was the patches of bare, human skin visible through the matted fur, as if the creature was caught midway through a transformation. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then it lunged. I dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as massive claws barely missed my face. I scrambled to my feet and ran, bursting out of the cabin and into the misty forest. Behind me, I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush. It was toying with me, I realized. It could have caught me already if it wanted to. I ran blindly through the fog, branches whipping at my face. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but I didn't dare stop. Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I tumbled down a steep embankment, landing hard at the bottom. Pain shot through my ankle, sprained, if not broken. I lay there, gasping for breath, waiting for the monster to finish me off. But the woods had gone silent again. Gingerly, I pulled myself to my feet, wincing at the pain in my ankle. I had to keep moving, had to find help. As I limped through the forest, my mind raced. What was that thing? Some kind of mutant wolf. But those messages in the cabin, they implied something far worse. Night was falling, the mist taking on an eerie glow in the fading light. And then I heard it, a long, mournful howl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I quickened my pace, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ankle. I had to find shelter, somewhere to hide until daylight. That's when I saw it, my old ranger station, nestled in a clearing up ahead. Relief washed over me. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy and defensible. If I could just make it inside. But as I approached, I noticed something odd. The door was ajar, and deep claw marks scored the weathered wood. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Cautiously, I pushed the door open, wincing as it creaked on its hinges. The interior was dark, the only light filtering in through the fog-shrouded windows. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking. As the beam cut through the gloom, I recoiled in horror. The ranger station was in shambles. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere, and blood, so much blood, painting the walls and pooling on the floor. But it was the figure in the center of the room that made my gorge rise. It was Tom, my old partner from my ranger days, or what was left of him. His body was a twisted, mangled ruin, limbs bent at impossible angles, flesh torn and shredded. But the worst part was his face. It was caught in a rictus of agony, his mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. And his eyes, dear God, his eyes were gone, leaving only bloody, gaping sockets. Pinned to his chest by a claw the size of a butcher's knife was a note, scrawled in what looked sickeningly like blood. "You can't escape. It's inside you now." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What did it mean? How could it be inside me? And then I remembered, the creature's claws raking across my face as I fled the cabin, the thin scratches burning like fire. Panic rising in my throat, I raced to the bathroom, staring into the cracked mirror. In the dim light, I could just make out the faint red lines across my cheek. But as I watched, transfixed with horror, the lines began to darken, to spread. Veins of black radiated out from the wounds, crawling up my face like some kind of grotesque spider web. I clawed at my skin, desperate to stop the spread. But it was like the infection had a mind of its own, burrowing deeper into my flesh. The pain exploded behind my eyes. I doubled over, retching. Something was moving inside me, writhing beneath my skin. I could feel my bones shifting, my muscles tearing and reknitting themselves. I screamed, a sound that was half human, half animal. In the mirror, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. My eyes, once a deep blue, were now a sickly yellow, the pupils narrowed to vertical slits. Fur began to sprout from my skin, coarse and dark. My jaw elongated, teeth lengthening into razor-sharp fangs. Claws burst from my fingertips, tearing through flesh and bone. The change was agonizing, every cell in my body rebelling against the unnatural transformation. I could feel my humanity slipping away, replaced by something primal, something savage. In a last, desperate act of will, I reached for my Ranger-issue sidearm, still strapped to Tom's lifeless body. The metal was cold against my temple as I closed my eyes, my finger tightening on the trigger. But even as I prepared to end it all, a dark hunger surged within me, the urge to hunt, kill, to feed. It overwhelmed me, drowning out all reason, all sense of self. The gun clattered to the floor as I dropped to all fours, a growl rumbling in my throat. The last shreds of my humanity were swept away in a tide of bloodlust. I burst out of the ranger station, a howl tearing from my lips. The mist swirled around me as I bounded into the forest, my powerful new form carrying me effortlessly over the rugged terrain. I could smell everything, the damp earth, the rotting leaves, the warm blood pumping through the veins of every living creature in the forest. And beneath it all, the scent of my own kind, calling to me. I ran to join them, reveling in the strength of my new body, the sharpness of my senses. I was a predator now, a king of the forest. And as I vanished into the mist, I left my old life behind, along with any shred of the man I used to be. I was something new now, something terrible. I was the monster in the woods, and I was hungry. The mountain town was deathly silent, muffled by the heavy blanket of snow. Icy wind bit at my cheeks as I moved steadily uphill, rifle in hand. This was my terrain, my domain. Whatever was out here, I would find it. And I would end it. My name's Caleb. I've lived in these parts my whole life. making a name for myself as the best hunter around. Ain't nothing in these woods that can hide from me for long. Or so I thought. The attack started a few weeks back. Livestock torn apart and disemboweled. Deer and moose found with their throats ripped out, strange symbols carved into their flesh. And those massive paw prints, far bigger than any mountain lion or wolf I'd ever seen. The townsfolk whispered about a rogue grizzly. But I knew better. No bear could have done what this thing did. Almost seemed ritualistic. So I set out to track it. Took me a couple days, but I found where it had made a kill. A young elk, its entrails strewn about the snow. I noted the direction of the tracks leading away and set off in pursuit. The prints were staggering, longer than my forearm. This was no ordinary beast. But that just made me more determined to catch it. I followed the trail into the back country, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of movement. The wind picked up, moaning through the pines, stirring up wisps of snow. The light faded as dusk approached, shadows creeping in. That's when the howl split the silence. Close. The sound sent a chill through my gut, too deep and rumbling for a wolf, almost human. I pushed on, my pulse thudding in my ears now. The tracks zigzagged crazily between the trees before disappearing completely at the edge of a clearing. I scanned the tree line, peering into the growing darkness. A flicker of movement caught my eye just as another bone-chilling howl echoed through the forest. There, across the clearing, two pinpoints of light hovering in the blackness. Eyes staring right at me. I snapped my rifle to my shoulder, drawing a bead on those glowing orbs in the shadows. My finger tightened on the trigger. Suddenly the eyes were gone. Just vanished, quick as a blink. Unease wormed its way through my gut. I kept sweeping my rifle barrel back and forth, eyes straining against the darkness. The wind picked up, driving the bitter cold deep into my bones. That's when I realized I was no longer the hunter. I was the hunted. An earthy, animal stench assaulted my nose. Drops of saliva splattered the snow an inch from my boots. Hot breath billowed against the back of my neck. I whirled around with a cry, rifle barrel swinging wildly. Nothing but shadows. Laughter echoed between the trees, guttural mocking. It seemed to come from all directions at once. I turned slowly, taking panicked breaths. "Come on out," I yelled, my voice sounding shrill and weak above the wind. "Face me." I caught a flash of movement to my left, a hulking, four-legged silhouette detaching itself from the darkness. Then it was gone again, playing with me. The damn thing was toying with me. I needed to regain control, set a trap, make it come to me. I retreated from the clearing, finding a thicket of pines with good sight lines. I nestled myself in, rifle trained on the open area beyond. "Come on, you bastard," I muttered through clenched teeth. "Come get me." Minutes passed at a glacial pace. My breath plumed in front of my face as I scanned relentlessly for any sign of the creature. When it finally came, it was so fast I nearly pulled the trigger out of reflex. A huge, hairy shape bursting from the underbrush right in front of me. I gasped, finger tightening on the trigger. But some primal instinct made me hesitate, just for a split second. Its eyes glowed red in the dark as it turned its massive head toward me. Lips peeled back, revealing jagged teeth capable of tearing a man in two. A low rumble emanated from its barrel chest, not quite a growl, but a warning. This close, there could be no doubt what it was. The legends were true. Werewolf. We stared at each other, predator and prey, both unwilling to move. Its hot, musky breath washed over me, as a claw tipped with talons the size of Bowie knives slid from its furry fist. Somehow, seeing the almost human-like hand jolted me from my frozen state. This was no mindless beast, it was intelligent cunning, and it had led me here. In a blur of movement, it swiped at me, shredding my parka and raking burning lines across my chest. I squeezed off 2 shots on instinct, but it was already gone, a massive shape disappearing into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, slick blood warming my torso underneath the tattered coat. The wounds weren't deep, but they burned like fury. I knew then that I was dead. It had marked me. There would be no escape, not on this mountain. I thought of the disemboweled animals, the strange rituals performed on its prey. A horrific end awaited me. The wind died down, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I tore my shredded coat off and let it fall to the snow. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, adrenaline and fear mixing into a bitter cocktail. I wasn't going down without a fight. If this thing wanted me, it would have a hell of a time taking me. I ejected the remaining shells from my rifle, counting them by touch. 4 left. Would have to make them count. The woods erupted in a cacophony of guttural cries. The damn thing was calling its pack. It didn't want me dead, it wanted me torn apart, slowly. A meal for the blood-hungry fiends. Glowing eyes appeared between the trees, drawing closer from all directions. I planted my feet, raised the rifle to my shoulder, and calmly sighted down the barrel. "All right, you bastards," I growled through clenched teeth. "Come and get it." My first shot took the closest werewolf right between the eyes. It dropped mid-leap, momentum carrying the corpse across the snow to land at my feet. The others hesitated. I used the pause to fire at 2 more glowing targets. A pained yelp told me I'd hit my mark again. The injured monster broke from the tree line, bounding toward me, its maw opening impossibly wide. My next bullet took it in the shoulder but didn't slow it down. I barely had time to register the remaining wolves rushing me as a 7-foot wall of fur and fury slammed into my chest. We went down in a tangle of limbs, its jaws snapping inches from my throat. I jammed my rifle crosswise into its mouth, gagging at the hot stench washing over me. We thrashed in the snow, my limbs leaden and weak now as blood poured from reopened wounds. Somehow I managed to wedge my knee under its rib cage to gain some leverage. With a burst of adrenaline I couldn't have explained, I flung it off me. It yelped as the rifle was torn from my hands, taking chunks of flesh with it. I clambered to my feet, my torn torso screaming in protest. But I stood tall, swaying drunkenly, as the pack closed in for the kill. Their slavering jaws would be the last thing I ever saw. I locked eyes with the lead wolf, seeing hellish intelligence there behind the savagery. "Come on then," I snarled, spreading my arms. "I'm right here." They hit me as one. The last thought that flashed through my mind before sharp teeth tore out my throat was, "You may have won, but I made you work for it."